small fish swims in tight, confident circles in front of an open mouth, enormous, lined with rows of teeth. It isn't fleeing. It isn't afraid. It's working. Every fin that brushes against rough, sun-bleached skin, every parasite pulled from deep inside a gill, every small scrap of dead tissue carefully picked away, can mean the difference between a healthy reef and a reef slowly falling apart. This is the cleaner fish, a tiny animal that spends much of its life inside the mouths, over the gills, and between the scales of creatures hundreds, sometimes thousands, of times larger than itself. But the strangest part of its story isn't how it feeds as an adult. It's everything that happens before that. How this fish is born out in the open ocean with nothing to protect it, how it survives entirely alone in a world built almost exclusively out of predators, and how it finally finds its place in the world. A small cleaning station on a coral reef, where giants of the sea patiently line up to be attended to. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next videos about wildlife, and leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing where all of you are tuning in from around the world. On the coral reef, the cleaner fish doesn't impress with its size. It's small, only a few centimeters long, especially next to a sea turtle, a bull shark, or a manta ray gliding overhead. But on the bodies of these enormous animals, it moves as if dancing across its own private landscape, one that belongs to no other creature on the reef. Its fins brush against smooth, cool skin. Its eyes scan every inch of the surface in front of it. Every crease, every fold, every half-open gill slit. Its small mouth approaches a healing wound, an area covered in parasites, or a hidden spot beneath the jaw where tiny worms and crustaceans tend to cling unnoticed. To the host, the fish's presence might seem indifferent, almost invisible, barely worth a second thought. But in truth, it's essential. That single spot on the reef has become a cleaning post, a mandatory stop, almost a checkpoint for dozens of different species that pass through it every single day. But before it becomes this tiny, tireless janitor of the ocean, the cleaner fish first has to be born. And it isn't born anywhere near a giant, anywhere near safety, or anywhere near the reef at all. It's born alone, adrift, suspended in the middle of the blue immensity, far from any shelter. The beginning, an egg loose in the current. It all starts at dusk, in the last soft light of the day, when pairs of adult cleaner fish rise together off the reef, just a few inches above the coral, in a brief, almost ritual dance that lasts only a matter of seconds. In that exact instant, eggs and sperm are released into the open water at the same time, and fertilization happens right there unprotected in the middle of the sea. There is no nest waiting below, no burrow dug into rock, no hollow log or hidden crevice. There is no protection at all beyond the current itself, and the current offers no protection whatsoever. The eggs are carried away almost immediately, tiny, nearly transparent, mixed in among thousands upon thousands of other organisms that together make up the plankton drifting across the open ocean. They don't float by choice. They float because they have no other option, no fins yet, no strength, nothing to push against the water with. For a while, the open ocean becomes the only world that exists for them, a place with no walls and no hiding spots, a place full of currents pushing in every direction, and a place crowded with predators that feed on exactly this kind of small, drifting, living particle. After a little more than a day, sometimes less, the egg finally breaks open. A tiny larva emerges into nothingness, transparent, almost formless, barely recognizable as a fish at all. It has no complete scales yet, no real color, no strength to swim against even the gentlest current. All it has is a small sack of energy reserves still attached to its body, just enough fuel to survive the first few critical days, and a blind, ancient instinct pulling it to swim upward toward the faint light filtering down from the surface above. Surviving the open sea. This larval stage can last anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the species and on the conditions of the surrounding ocean, water temperature, current strength, and how much food happens to be available along the way. It is, by far, the most dangerous period in a cleaner fish's entire life. more dangerous than anything that will come afterward. Every single minute spent adrift is a minute spent exposed, with nowhere to hide and nothing to hide behind. Jellyfish trailing stinging tentacles, the larvae of other, much larger fish, small predatory crustaceans patrolling the water column. To almost everything that crosses its path during these weeks, this tiny larva is nothing more than another food particle floating helplessly in the middle of the ocean. The larva has no way to hide, no way to fight back, no way to call for help. Its only real defense is sheer numbers. Of the many thousands of eggs released by a single pair of cleaner fish in one spawning event, only a small fraction will ever survive to the end of this larval stage. Most will be eaten within days. Some will simply be lost, swept away by currents into water too cold, too deep, or too far from any reef. Others won't find enough food in time and will slowly starve, too weak to keep swimming. But little by little, for the fortunate few, the tiny body begins to change. The eyes finish forming, sharper now, better able to detect movement nearby. A simple spine begins to give real structure to what was once a shapeless, transparent body. The first true fins appear, still fragile, still thin as paper, but already enough to give some real control over the direction of the swim, some ability to dart away from danger instead of merely drifting toward it. The larva begins hunting on its own for the first time, chasing down organisms even smaller than itself, learning, through pure instinct and repetition, the crucial difference between what is food and what is threat. And then, one day, something changes on the endless blue horizon of water. A darker shadow appears somewhere below, breaking up the featureless blue. A different scent, sharper and more complex, spreads slowly through the current. It's the reef, finding a home among the corals. Guided by chemical signals dissolved in the water and by the distinctive sound a healthy coral reef produces underwater. The constant snapping and crackling of thousands of shrimp, the rustle of fish moving between the rocks, the low, muffled crash of waves breaking somewhere far above the surface. The tiny larva finally swims toward the bottom for the first time in weeks. This single moment is called settlement, and it stands as one of the most decisive moments of its entire life. If it doesn't manage to find a healthy, living reef in time, one with enough hiding places tucked between the corals and enough food available nearby, it simply will not survive what comes next. Upon touching the bottom at last, the small fish is no longer the transparent larva that had been drifting helplessly for weeks. Its body begins, almost immediately, to gain real color, usually forming a sharp, distinct contrast between a dark stripe running down one side and a lighter band along the other, a pattern that will later serve almost like an ID badge, instantly recognized by other fish across the entire reef. For now, it hides carefully among the narrow crevices of the coral, still far too small and too vulnerable to venture into open water, still quietly learning the first behaviors that will go on to define the rest of its life. It's during this early period on the reef, tucked away and half-hidden, that the cleaning instinct first begins to emerge. Young cleaner fish start approaching larger fish that pass nearby, almost out of simple curiosity at first, lightly touching their small mouths to spots on the skin or along the base of the fins. In the beginning, this can look like nothing more than harmless exploration, a young fish testing the world around it. But little by little, over days and weeks, it turns into something far more precise and deliberate. The young fish learns to recognize parasites, excess mucus, and small bits of dead skin as a genuine, reliable source of food, and it also learns, almost simultaneously, that many of these much larger fish not only tolerate this kind of contact, but actively seek it out, learning to serve the giants. Over time, as it grows stronger and more confident, the small cleaner fish comes to occupy a fixed, permanent territory on the reef, what's known among researchers as a cleaning station. It might be an isolated coral head sitting apart from the rest of the reef, a rocky outcrop, or a specific, well-known stretch near a reef wall where currents happen to bring a steady stream of visitors. This one small patch of reef becomes, at the same time, its home, its territory, and its lifelong workplace. That's where the visitors begin to arrive, drawn in from all directions almost as if by appointment. At first, mostly medium-sized reef fish, damselfish, butterflyfish, parrotfish, wrasses of other species. Each one approaches the station and adopts a very specific, almost theatrical posture, one that clearly signals its intentions, almost as if saying out loud, "I'm ready to be cleaned." Fins spread wide open, body tilted slightly to one side, mouth held half open and still. The cleaner fish recognizes this signal instantly and gets straight to work, swimming in tight loops around the visitor's entire body, touching each area with small, precise, almost surgical movements, carefully picking off parasites stuck to the skin, hidden in the fins, or lodged deep inside the gills. Then, as it continues to grow and gain real experience, season after season, the cleaner fish begins to serve visitors that are ever larger and, in many cases, genuinely dangerous. Nurse sharks that settle down, motionless, on the sandy bottom nearby, waiting with what looks almost like patience. Sea turtles that slow their steady pace and glide toward the station like something that has made this exact same trip many times before. Manta rays that hover almost perfectly still in the water column, their enormous gill openings spread wide, deliberately allowing the small fish to swim in and work deep inside the gill chambers themselves, a hidden place no other animal on the entire reef would ever dare to venture into. For the giant, all of this is pure relief. Parasites removed one by one, small wounds gently cleaned, skin and gills left visibly healthier. For the cleaner fish, all of this is something closer to survival itself. A steady, remarkably reliable source of food delivered right to its doorstep, without ever needing to hunt out in open water, without ever needing to expose itself to the same relentless dangers that threaten most small, unprotected fish living on the reef. But, just as was true between the birds and the great mammals of the African savanna, this relationship isn't always simple, and it isn't always fair. It has been observed more than once that cleaner fish, instead of removing only parasites as expected, will sometimes nibble instead at the host's protective mucus layer or at small bits of perfectly healthy skin, quietly taking advantage of the trust that has been carefully built up over many previous visits. Nature, once again, proves that it is never perfectly clean and never perfectly gentle. Most of the time, underneath the surface, it is really a constant, ongoing negotiation over what each side stands to gain and what each side is willing to tolerate losing. Adult life among the giants. By the time it finally reaches full maturity, after months of growth on the reef, the cleaner fish is no longer anything like the same transparent, utterly defenseless creature that once drifted alone through the open ocean with nothing to protect it. Now it knows its own territory intimately, down to every crevice and coral head. It recognizes dozens of different visiting species on site, often before they've even finished approaching the station. And it's fully capable of managing entire lines of fish waiting patiently to be attended to, choosing, at certain busy moments, exactly who gets cleaned first and who has to wait. It has learned, through long experience, to move safely between mouths lined with rows of sharp teeth, trusting a kind of unspoken truce that took time to build. It has learned to read the subtle body language signals of each different species that approaches its station. And it has learned, above all else, that its own survival is directly and permanently tied to the trust that these ocean giants place in it. Trust that has to be earned and maintained, visit after visit, day after day, for the cleaning station to keep functioning at all. In time, this same cleaner fish will go on to take part in that same dusk dance itself, rising off the reef at nightfall to release its own eggs and sperm into the open current, starting an entirely new generation of transparent larvae that will immediately be carried far away from the reef, alone, out into the blue immensity, retracing the exact same perilous path that it once traveled itself, all those months before. This is the full life cycle of the cleaner fish. An egg loose in the current with nothing to protect it. A tiny larva fighting against enormous odds to survive in the open sea. A young fish finally finding shelter and identity among the corals. And at last, a small adult fish that has learned to live and even to genuinely thrive by patiently caring for the giants of the ocean. From the bodies of these enormous creatures, once again and endlessly, the next generation of little cleaner fish is born.